Droids by Dark Horse Comics was released between 1994 and 1997 and is a reboot or successor series of sorts to the animated show from the 80s, as well as the comics that were released around the same time by Marvel, and follows C-3PO and R2-D2 during their misadventures before the events of Episode 4, most of the time dealing with them being with a group of people that they are in service to as they have to deal with many different aliens and other droids of the sorts, and it's mostly just them getting into these interesting situations, more or less. And this comic series, is right off the heels of other comics that were coming out at the time from Dark Horse, such as Dark Empire and Tales of the Jedi, and this is the next thing that they did after that stuff got started. And this is definitely the weakest of the bunch, and this is probably the worst of the Star Wars comics that I have read thus far. I just didn't find this very interesting at all. I have a soft spot, sort of, for the Droids comics of the Marvel era, because I did, for the most part, enjoy that cartoon series a lot, and it was fun seeing these comics kind of continue on with that story. The art for those books and that show was, very unique and fun and everything. And then this goes for the more realistic look of how they're supposed to look in the movies and everything. And it just doesn't have the same type of charm, even though it's more or less the same that we got in both the show and the Marvel comics at the time. It's just not as entertaining and definitely just not fun to read overall. The stories aren't necessarily bad, except for a few that I found just really dumb and not that entertaining, but nothing is too bad. It's just very bland and engaging, and the art is very pretty and everything. It looks good on the page, but there's just nothing about it that stands out. This really isn't a story that delves into C-3PO and R2-D2 that much. In fact, I think this really shows at this point that C-3PO and R2-D2 just do not work as main characters. They work well as side characters, but when you have them in the lead roles, one of them doesn't even really talk, and the other is kind of annoying. So it just didn't make for a very entertaining read, and it just didn't have the charm of those 80s comics. There are some interesting things, though. I do like that it shows how C-3PO got his silver leg that he has at the beginning of Episode 4. That was fun. It wasn't needed or anything, but it was just fun that they decided to do it, and it was something that, was worth talking about a little bit. But for the most part, I just didn't find any of these stories that interesting. Some of them can be a lot of fun. Some of them do have that goofy tone that the previous Marvel comics had and the show. But for the most part, I found myself just rather bored and wanting to get to the very end. Luckily, this comic book series is not that long. It's over 12 or so issues. So, I mean, this can easily be, read very quickly. And overall, I just don't see a reason to really read this. It didn't have a reason to really exist other than putting out some Star Wars content at the time. So, yeah, overall, this is... I think maybe children could enjoy this. It's definitely not written for adults, really, in mind. I'm guessing adults could enjoy it if they were into this sort of thing. But it is very childish and just not that interesting overall. I really don't know how else to talk about it, because this review is probably going to be really short, more or less, because there was just nothing at the end of the day that was really worth talking about it. It was rather disappointing, especially after enjoying Dark Empire as well as Tales of the Jedi. Even though I had my problems with that miniseries at the beginning, it still gave a reason to exist. This really didn't prove its own existence. So anyway, guys, with all that said, I'm going to give Droids a 5 out of 10. I almost debated giving this a 6 because there were some moments that I really did, have a lot of fun with, but for the most part, I found myself really bored, and I think that needs to be shown in my rating. So yeah, I definitely would not recommend anybody really reading Droids unless you are very curious about the Dark Horse era of Star Wars and you want to read every single thing that they did. That's the only reason I would ever recommend this. It just doesn't really add anything overall. But anyway, guys, I want to thank you for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next review.